In 2022, Russia made headlines when it donated a large amount of fertilizer to Kenya, claiming to help alleviate food insecurity. The donation, which was part of broader diplomatic efforts by Russia, was positioned as a humanitarian gesture. The reasoning behind this donation was largely to assist in mitigating the effects of a global fertilizer shortage, exacerbated by the ongoing war in Ukraine. Russia, as one of the world's largest producers of fertilizer, saw an opportunity to improve its diplomatic standing in Africa and maintain influence in a region that was increasingly becoming a battleground for global power. Why Russia donated fertilizer to Kenya humanitarian support? The donation was presented as part of Russia's effort to help African countries combat food insecurity, which had been worsened by the disruptions caused by the war in Ukraine. The global fertilizer shortage, resulting from sanctions on Russia and the war, had created significant challenges for farmers worldwide, especially in countries that heavily relied on imports of agricultural inputs. Diplomatic strategy. Russia sought to strengthen ties with African countries, where it had historically maintained influence. Russia's soft power approach in Africa, through donations and strategic partnerships, was meant to counterbalance Western influence, particularly in countries like Kenya, which had strong historical ties to the West. Economic gains. Beyond the humanitarian aspects, Russia likely saw an opportunity to bolster its economic interests. By positioning itself as a critical supplier of fertilizers, Russia could further entrench itself in key markets in Africa, ensuring future trade relations even as it faced international sanctions in other areas. The scandal of the sale of donated fertilizer. However, the situation took a controversial turn when it was revealed that the Kenyan government had sold a portion of the donated fertilizer. Instead of being distributed directly to farmers or used for its intended humanitarian purposes, the fertilizer was allegedly sold to private buyers at a profit. This led to accusations of corruption and misuse of aid. Here's a breakdown of how the government sold the donated fertilizer. Fertilizer distribution process. The fertilizer was initially intended to be distributed to Kenyan farmers at subsidized rates to help alleviate the challenges they faced due to the global food crisis. However, once the shipment arrived, it was handled by government officials and agencies that were supposed to oversee its fair distribution. The alleged corruption. Some government officials, however, were accused of selling the fertilizer to private individuals or companies instead of distributing it to farmers. There were claims that middlemen bought the fertilizer and resold it for a higher price, which not only deprived the intended beneficiaries, the farmers, but also fueled suspicions of financial impropriety within the government. Lack of oversight. The scandal was made worse by the fact that there seemed to be a lack of proper oversight and transparency in the distribution process. This allowed for the misappropriation of the donated fertilizer, with the government failing to account for how much was actually given to the farmers versus how much ended up in private hands. Public outrage. The news of the fertilizer being sold created public outrage, particularly among farmers who were struggling to access affordable fertilizers. The government faced heavy criticism for mismanaging foreign aid, and accusations of corruption tarnished its image. Consequences and aftermath investigations. Following the scandal, the Kenyan government was pressured to launch investigations into the alleged misuse of the fertilizer. Some officials were questioned, though the depth of accountability remains unclear. Diplomatic impact. While Russia's initial donation was seen as a gesture of goodwill, the subsequent scandal led to mixed feelings. Russia's intent might have been to foster goodwill, but the mismanagement of the donation harmed Kenya's public image and created skepticism about foreign aid. Increased scrutiny. This incident highlighted broader concerns about the governance and transparency of foreign aid and humanitarian assistance in Kenya, and it sparked debates on how such donations should be handled to ensure that they reach their intended recipients. In summary, Russia's donation of fertilizer to Kenya was driven by diplomatic and humanitarian motives, but the scandal surrounding the sale of the donated goods undermined its positive impact. The incident raised concerns about corruption and mismanagement in the Kenyan government and tarnished the reputation of both the aid initiative and the government's ability to manage such donations.